And as we modernize our payments, we want to make sure that the data is really at the center of it. And that's what ISO is about, but it's also what we're about.
Welcome to the exciting world of global payments and the big themes across this industry. You're listening to Commonwealth Bank's Global Payment Series with me, Carli Renzi, Managing Director of Institutional Client Coverage at CBA. Thanks for joining me today as we explore the exciting world of payments with Ethan Tees, CBA's Global Head of Payments. Ethan, we're going to talk about the huge transition away from the Swift MT global messaging format to the new Swift MX global messaging format, which is compliant with the ISO 20022 standard that's to be fully adopted by industry by November 2025. It's quite a mouthful, and I think we're just calling it ISO, right? How's Australia looking at the ISO opportunities? And I guess it struck me that Australia's take-up is looking pretty high at this point. Can you talk a bit to that?
Thanks, Carli, and thanks so much for having me. I got to say, when I think about ISO, I always start at the beginning, and that is, what is ISO? And the most important thing is we can say it any way we want. ISO 20022, ISO 20022, ISO 20022. But in all cases, it's the same thing, right? And this is we're moving from unstructured small data to big structured data. And when we think about the opportunity in that, it's immense. I know we'll talk a little bit more about that. You asked, why is Australia at 70% already? Well, a couple things go into that. One is in Australia, we have 4 major banks here that do the majority of the clearing. And those banks are all technologically advanced, CBA among them. Also, we have the deadline for ISO is coming in November this year for the end of the coexistence. And when we think about the 70 countries that are making this transition, Australia is kind of in the middle. We're after Europe, but we're before the United States, and everyone's getting ready for the MX traffic to be the only traffic in Australia.
Thanks, Ethan. So you mentioned that Australia's coexistence period finishes in November this year, and there's a lot of preparation for the MX traffic. How does that affect CBA's payments modernisation journey?
Yeah, 100%. So at the heart of our payments journey at CBA are really 3 things. One is real-time, and CBA has been in the real-time ledger business. We were the first in Australia, 2012, 2013. We had real-time banking. And then we have real-time payments in 2018, where we were the first transactions on the NPP, our real-time payments rail here. And then now we're looking at everything real-time, even on the Swift payments, heading towards Swift Instant, where we have real-time across the board. So a big part of our modernization is bringing everything into real-time, and that means 24/7 availability, which in turn means a lot of work into the cloud, but also into making all of our technology available 24/7. So, for example, we're the first bank, and I think still the only bank in Australia that's inward clearing AUD 24/7. So that's real-time and 24/7. The second one is the data richness. And again, like here, we're led, from our past. CBA is the number 1 AI bank in Australia. And in fact, kind of tops in the Southern Hemisphere and APAC. CBA has been an innovator with data the whole way through, and we see 40% of the payments in Australia. And so in that, data is really critical to us. And as we modernize our payments, we want to make sure that the data is really at the center of it. And that's what ISO is about, but it's also what we're about. So as we modernize our high-value and international stack, we've chosen to go ISO native. And so what does that mean? We have thousands of rules that route and treat the payments as they come through the system. Because we've chosen to go ISO native, that means all that enhanced data that's available in ISO will be available to all those rules. Now, there could have been another choice. Some banks have chosen to use translators extensively to make sure that they can be compliant in the data, and they can even enrich the data, but they may not, in their core processing stack, have ISO end-to-end. And that's where we're headed with our modernization, is to have ISO end-to-end. So that's kind of number 2, is the data richness. And the third one is, I think, like the endless beat of modernization is really around the availability and reliability. And so in Australia, we have some regulation coming in called CPS 230 that really complements our focus on availability. So we've taken our planned downtime, down by orders of magnitude on all of our payment rails, and a lot of that's been driven by the NPP. And we also have a huge focus on our unplanned downtime to make sure that we have highly reliable systems. Swift is great at driving over 4.9s of 4.9.5 in availability, and the bank has the same aspiration to be that reliable.
So, Ethan, you said for our payments modernisation that firstly, it's about everything into 24/7 real time. Secondly, it's about putting data at the centre by going ISO native. And lastly, it's all about stability, reliability, and availability. I can see that's going to drive a lot of value for our customers. And as Australia's largest bank, that means we're talking about 1 in every 2 inbound commercial payments going to a CBA beneficiary. So, really big responsibility also for the country. And I guess it must shape how you think about payments.
I think it's a real important question, Carli, around partnership and how we're thinking about that as we modernize. The really critical thing about payments in the cross-border payment space is that we all work with each other. And in that, our bias is always to work with the other banks because we're all working together. We're in this incredible community, and we can bring great value to our customers if we can modernize together. So the first place I look to for a partnership is the banks that we're working with, the banks that we admire around the world, and we know that they have the same thing in mind that we do, which is the best experience for their customers, right? So at CBA, we've had a great retail bank for over 100 years. The business bank, kind of the heartland of SME and even middle market corporates, we've gone, again, to be the number one bank there over the past 4 years. And so now more than 1 in 4 of those businesses would treat CBA as their MFI. And in the institutional space, the large corporates, we're similarly penetrated and actually growing. So that's the critical thing for us is we've got all these corporate customers. They have needs. Our partners bring those needs to life. And we're really conscious that when we're partnering with the bank overseas, we also bring the needs of their customers to life. And so that's how we think about partnership is how do we serve our customers? And then when we're talking to another bank, how do we serve your customers and how do we do that deeply? One example of that is recently we've rolled out this name check API. And in that, what that does is that makes payments safer. So I have this idea of like payment perfection, which is, no losses to payments, no mistaken payments, no back office. And in that, the name check API basically allows, trusted partners, which could be our overseas counterparties, to pre-validate the payment and make sure that it's going to an account that exists. It's likely to have a beneficiary match. And that's going to save them both mistaken payments, trace and recalls, back office work, but also their customers from having losses, scam losses into a mule account or something like that. And we think that's a great thing that we can bring to the community, we can bring to our partners, and we're always looking for the next thing that looks just like that.
Thanks, Ethan. NameCheck's a great example of something we're bringing to partners and how we can be a leading voice for payments in Australia, something you've spoken of when launching the group payment strategy and our aspirations. Is it secret or can you share some of your new payment strategy with our listeners?
Carli, thanks for the question about strategy. When I think about strategy, the first thing is that any strategy that we put together should be both durable and also something that we're happy to share with our clients. And so in that, we have the payment strategy at the group level for CBA. And then we have, of course, each of our areas has its own strategy. We've just redone the payments group strategy. And, 2 things have featured in that. We do that every 3 years. And I think the 2 things that are most critical there is like, number one, we have this recognition that our role as an infrastructure provider in wholesale payments is really critical. And we're really doubling down on that. And the clearing business is like central to that because we see the connectivity right through to our corporate business, to our SME business, and to our consumer business, right? The more that we're operating in that layer, we can help all of the customers have the best experience. The second thing is we've got this idea that because we've got the dominant share in retail and in SME, and we've got really strong share end-to-end, that we can bring experiences to life that are two-sided. So those are 2 kind of central tenets of the strategy now. But the third one I think is perhaps just as important, which is we want to be the leading voice for payments in Australia. And that's not just domestic payments, but that's global payments. And you see that in the way we show up at the industry. I would say that CBA is showing up with the best, deepest, and most balanced thinking for all of our regulatory consultations. We're also showing up, to industry with the local payment schemes here, really trying to look around corners. And then we're we're leading the way on the cross-border payments, right? So, we have, roles on the ISO 20022 Industry Migration Steering Committee. We're on the G20 PI, that's the Payments Interoperability and Extension Task Force. And we're also in the RBA's industry pilot for CBDC, right? And I think we're the only bank that can say all of that. Of course, I sit on the board of SWIFT as the nominee director for Australia as well. I mean, this conversation is really from my bank role. We don't, as SWIFT board members, talk about the SWIFT role, but that gives incredible exposure, right? So if you think about it, people on our teams are having the global conversation in the G20. We're in Europe on a regular basis and in North America on a regular basis. In fact, I'm going tomorrow to North America. And then we're in the local conversation and probably in the deepest and the biggest way. And we think it's really important to be the leading voice, not only because it means that we can drive better outcomes for all, but also it tests our thinking and it sharpens our priorities as we build for our customers and partners.
Ethan, thank you for your time today.
Thanks, Carli. It's been an honor and a pleasure spending time with you once again.
You've been hearing from Ethan Tees, Executive General Manager for Payments at CBA. That concludes our topic today on speeding up payments using richer data. Thank you for listening. Tune in again to hear more insights from CBA on the exciting world of global payments.
Things you should know. Guests featured in this podcast are speaking from their personal experiences only. As this podcast has been prepared without considering your objectives, financial situation, or needs, you should, before acting on the content, consider its appropriateness to your circumstances. CommBank does not necessarily endorse the views of a particular individual or guarantee the accuracy of the information provided.